I was just getting in my pickup to come to town, and the CB was on, and a guy said, "Yeah, there's a hell of a wreck in there. That guy in that Bronco don't look like he's doing very good." A Bronco? Oh no. You know, and that's my memory. That's the last one. And he left, and Gabe was gone.
Shelby Stanga, the fearless logger from the History Channel's hit series Axe Men, was once one of the most recognizable faces on TV. Known to millions as the Swamp Man, Shelby won hearts with his unique logging methods, cool head in dangerous situations, and wild adventures. But after Shelby suddenly left the show in 2012, his life took some unexpected turns. From brutal storms to legal troubles and heartbreaking losses, the Swamp Man's journey has been far from smooth. Join us as we uncover what really happened to Shelby Stanga.
Can it go through here?
I'm pretty sure if you make it.
Hold on.
Oh my God.
Hold on!
Oh. Oh! Oh!
For most of his time on Axe Men, Shelby Stanga was the face of the show. With his thick Louisiana accent, wild beard, and no-nonsense swamp man attitude, he quickly became a fan favorite. It didn't matter if he was pulling logs out of the water, wrangling snakes, or just yelling colorful phrases at his crew. Shelby brought something special that no one else on the show could match. Shelby was so popular that the History Channel gave him his own spin-off, The Legend of Shelby the Swamp Man. The show documented his life in the Louisiana bayou as he tackled odd jobs, got into trouble, and lived life his unique way. However, despite his fame and impact, Shelby shockingly left the franchise without warning. There was no farewell episode, no news announcement, and no apparent reason why he left. One season he was there, and the next, nothing. Fans waited for an update, a post online, or word from the producers, but nothing happened. The lack of any explanation only made things worse. That's when the rumors started. At first, people thought he might have just taken a break. Logging is a dangerous and exhausting task, and he may need time off. However, on social media, some fans started saying Shelby had been seriously injured during filming. Others claimed he had died in a logging accident. The rumors spread quickly, especially since Axe Men had already lost several cast members in real life. However, despite the news, no media outlet reported Shelby's death, and it soon became clear that the report of his passing away was just a rumor. He did have an accident while filming Axe Men, but it wasn't fatal. He survived. The exact details were never made public, and Shelby didn't say much about it either, which only added to the confusion. Still, trusted sources confirmed in the years that followed that he was fine and still living in Louisiana. While Shelby eventually resurfaced, others from the Axe Men family weren't as fortunate, and the losses hit him and the fans very hard. Shelby and the Axe Men family have faced some extremely challenging times in recent years. They've lost people who meant a lot to them and to the fans who watched the show. In 2012, fans said goodbye to two famous figures, Jimmy Smith, who died of cancer, and William Bart Colantuono, who passed away in a helicopter crash. Also, one of the saddest losses was Gabe Rygard. Gabe, who was fondly known as the Axe Man, passed away in a car accident on September 16, 2016, near Port Angeles, Washington. What made it even more heartbreaking was that Gabe was the only one who lost his life in the accident. The 6 other people involved only sustained minor injuries. Gabe wasn't wearing a seatbelt at the time of the accident, which ultimately cost him his life. Gabe wasn't just part of the show. He was also a good friend to Shelby and everyone on the crew. After Gabe's death, Shelby announced the news on Facebook, paying tribute to his dearly departed friend. In the post, Shelby explained that he wanted people to know the real Gabe, not just the one they saw on TV. On the show, Gabe sometimes came across as a tough boss, but Shelby said that wasn't who he really was. Shelby described Gabe as someone who was quite the opposite in real life, a man who was highly motivated and always wanted the best out of his people, not through intimidation or harsh treatment, but through genuine care and leadership. Shelby also warned fans to refrain from speaking negatively about the dead, clarifying that Axe Men was a reality show, and not everything about it was real. He explained that a lot of the drama was made up for TV, and that the real Gabe was a loving family man, a strong worker, and a loyal friend. Sadly, Gabe wasn't the only one Shelby had to say goodbye to. Another dear friend, Richard Fletcher, who fans knew as Cousin Richard, also passed away. Shelby also paid tribute to Richard on Facebook, revealing that he had been sick for a long time. Shelby stated Richard was a fixture on the river and called him a true swamp rat, which in Shelby's world means someone strong, dependable, and respected. Back in 2014, things took a rough turn for Shelby Stanga when he got arrested for something that, at first glance, might not seem like a big deal, cutting down a neighbor's cypress tree. But in Louisiana, cypress trees are a big deal. They're not just any tree, they're the official state tree and are deeply respected, especially in swamp communities. The situation actually began in 2011 when Shelby reportedly cut down the tree. But it wasn't until 3 years later, in 2014, that he understood just how much trouble he had caused himself. Authorities claimed the tree was on his neighbor's land and Shelby didn't have permission to take it. Being someone who made his living cutting swamp trees, perhaps it didn't feel like a big deal at the time, but legally, it was a serious matter. He was charged with felony theft, a major crime that could have resulted in jail time. What made it all even harder was the timing. Shelby's arrest happened when he was at the height of his fame on TV. Fans knew him as the wild and funny Swamp Man, and suddenly he was in the news for all the wrong reasons. The case stood out not just for what happened, but for how long it took to unfold. Nearly 3 years passed between when the tree was allegedly cut and when Shelby was finally arrested. In areas like that, shifting water levels can confuse property lines, making it difficult to know exactly where one person's land ends and another's begins. On top of that, collecting solid evidence in a swamp environment is no easy task. Nonetheless, Shelby didn't stay in jail long. He was released the next day, which indicated that the authorities didn't consider him a danger or someone who would run away. But even though he was out, the charge still hung over him like a storm cloud. A felony could have ended his career or harmed his business. Through it all, Shelby kept quiet. He never made a public statement or tried to explain his side. In the end, the case was settled quietly. Most believe there was some kind of agreement, but the details were never shared with the public. While Shelby managed to quietly resolve his legal troubles, he soon faced the heartbreaking loss of one of his most loyal companions. If you ever watched Axemen or The Legend of Shelby the Swamp Man, you probably remember a little dog named Willie. Shelby called him Piss Willie.
I love my little puppy. I love him a whole bunch. That's like my child. Little boy.
He was small, scruffy, and full of energy. However, to Shelby, Willie was much more than just a pet. He was a friend, a worker, and a true part of the swamp crew. He was what Shelby called a swamp dog, tough, intelligent, and brave. He could catch his own food, swim in muddy water, and ride in boats like a pro. Even though he was little, Shelby used to say he was a lot of dog in a little package. Willie appeared in many episodes of Axemen. In one of the most memorable ones, called Where's Willie?, the crew was in a panic when Willie went missing. Shelby searched everywhere, calling his name through the trees. Fans could feel how worried he was. That episode showed just how close Shelby and Willie were. However, over time, viewers noticed that Willie was getting older. In another episode, Shelby even had to take him to the vet because Willie didn't seem like himself. In 2015, Shelby shared the sad news on his Facebook page that his beloved dog Willie had passed away. He expressed how difficult it was to say goodbye, even though he knew the day would eventually come. He also took time to thank those who had helped care for Willie in his final years. In a heartfelt tribute, Shelby reflected on the bond they shared and ended his message with a familiar phrase he used to say to Willie whenever they set out into the swamp: "Get in the boat, Willie, and hang on." It was clear from Shelby's words and from the fans' reactions that Willie was more than just a dog. He was part of Shelby's story, part of the swamp, and part of the reason people loved watching the show. Another post from Shelby showed just how much he missed his dog. It had a picture of him singing to Willie during a quiet night by the lakeshore. Shelby wrote that it was hard to even talk about the show that night and that they should dedicate the episode to Willie because he was a better player than most on the show. Willie may be gone, but he's not forgotten. Fans still remember the little swamp dog who rode boats, chased gators, and stood proudly next to Shelby. Still mourning the loss of his loyal companion Willie, Shelby and his community soon found themselves facing yet another challenge. In 2016, Shelby and his river neighbors faced one of the toughest years of their lives. That year, not one, but two massive floods tore through their beloved Tangipahoa River area in Louisiana. These were historic disasters that changed the land, the people, and the river community forever. The first flood struck in March 2016, following more than a week of relentless rain from March 8th to March 19th. The Tangipahoa River near the town of Robert rose quickly from just 8 feet to nearly 26 feet in only a few days. That was more than 4 feet over what's considered a major flood level. Approximately 600 homes were flooded, and hundreds of people were forced to leave their homes and seek shelter. But that flood was just the beginning. In August, disasters struck again. Between August 11th and 14th, another huge storm system dumped over 30 inches of rain in some parts of southern Louisiana. The river rose to 27.3 feet, breaking the record set almost 100 years earlier in 1921. This flood was beyond anything people had ever seen, and half of Tangipahoa Parish was underwater. Entire communities were underwater. Interstate 12, a major highway, was shut down for 62 miles, leaving cars and trucks stranded and forcing 1,500 people to spend over a day stuck on the road. Across the region, more than 50,000 buildings were damaged. The disaster also claimed 13 lives, 3 of them in Tangipahoa Parish alone. Meanwhile, for Shelby and his neighbors, the flood resulted in multiple damages to their homes and much of their land that was covered in muddy water. After the August flood, Shelby's team took to Facebook to update fans on his situation. They assured everyone that Shelby and the other river residents were safe, calling the flood one of the challenges that come with living in such a beautiful but unpredictable place. The post also acknowledged the serious impact on the community, noting that many neighbors had lost everything and were in need of support. Despite the devastation, the message ended on a hopeful note, with a promise to stay strong, clean up, and keep moving forward. The flood was called the worst natural disaster in the U.S. since Hurricane Sandy in 2012. Thousands of people had to be rescued by the National Guard, the Coast Guard, and even a brave group of local volunteers known as the Cajun Navy. The damage was so bad that the government declared 20 parishes, including Tangipahoa, as federal disaster zones. More than 100,000 people asked FEMA for help. But even after all that, Shelby and his community never gave up. The river may rise, but so do they. Just as Shelby and his community were recovering from the floods, his personal life also brought him a glimmer of hope. In February 2016, Shelby let the world in on a deeply personal and emotional moment. His cousin Johnny had just returned home after undergoing a life-saving transplant. For months, maybe even years, the family had waited and hoped for this moment. That moment finally came in September when he got the call that would change his life. The news was both a shock and a relief for fans who knew Cousin Johnny from his appearances on Axemen, but were unaware of his health condition. Fans who watched Axemen remember Cousin Johnny as Shelby's eccentric relative who helped him hunt for logs in the swamps. Cousin Johnny was also known for his excessive drinking of moonshine and his fearless attitude in the face of danger. However, what most fans didn't know was that behind the scenes, Johnny was battling more than alligators and chainsaws. Johnny's kidneys were failing, and he, together with his family, was waiting for a miracle. Thankfully, their prayers were answered when they got the call in September 2015. Meanwhile, in his post, Shelby also revealed Johnny's happy ending came with a heartbreaking reality. The kidney that saved Johnny's life came from someone who had died. He asked fans to keep the donor's family in their thoughts, reminding everyone that Johnny's second chance was made possible through someone else's loss. After watching Johnny sparingly on Axemen and as a season regular in the spin-off The Swamp Men, many fans who saw Shelby's post sent heartfelt messages to the family, praying for Johnny's quick recovery. Meanwhile, Shelby soon had to switch attention to rebuilding his career. After stepping away from television for a while, Shelby Stanga made a big return in 2018. Fans were thrilled when the return of Shelby the Swamp Man premiered on October 11th. However, his return wasn't just about getting back on TV, it was something much more meaningful. Shelby came back to help his community and show how strong they were after some really hard times. For a few years, Shelby had stayed off camera. He'd had problems with some of the people running his earlier shows on the History Channel. There were disagreements over money, and Shelby didn't like how things were being handled, so he stepped away. It wasn't an easy choice, but it gave him time to think about what really mattered. When he decided to come back, it was on his own terms. He wanted more control over how his story and his community were shown. When Shelby returned to the screen, the focus wasn't just on cutting trees or swamp adventures. Instead, he wanted the show to be about helping people. Louisiana had been hit hard by massive floods in 2016, and many folks were still struggling. Shelby used his skills, tools, and heart to lend a hand. Whether it was fixing up local buildings, helping small businesses, or simply being there for his neighbors, Shelby showed what it meant to be part of a real community. In one episode, Shelby assisted a local swamp museum in recovering from flood damage. In another instance, he stepped in to assist a young woodworker who had received a large order and needed help completing it. Unlike the original series, these weren't just jobs, they were acts of service. Each episode demonstrated how people in the bayou rely on one another and how one man's efforts can impact an entire town. After the premiere, the return of Shelby the Swamp Man quickly became a fan favorite, earning an impressive 8.2 out of 10 rating on IMDb, based on over 1,000 votes. Old fans were happy to see Shelby back, and new viewers were drawn to the heart of the show. Shelby's return also marked a new chapter in his life. He wasn't just a TV star anymore. As of 2024, reports indicate that he's working with approximately 20 different companies. That means his work now goes far beyond logging or being in front of a camera. He's building a career that includes business, storytelling, and giving back.